Hello, this is Dwight Mutonono, also known as Mnyarazi, also known as Mutos, and welcome to the Connection Desk. We're in Acts chapter 23, and we'll be going from verse 23 through to 35. That's the last part of the chapter. And in this section, we are now in a situation where Paul is going to Caesarea Philippi. He's been sent there by the Roman commander. His name is Claudius Lysias. Claudius Lysias sends him to Caesarea Philippi, where the governor there was named Felix. And this is actually a very good example of narrative making and what we can learn about how people create narratives and how they can positively talk about themselves whenever when they present themselves. So you always, whenever you listen to a narrative, you must always understand that it usually is, it usually gives the narrator in a very positive light and says very good things about the narrator. But anyway, let's get into the story from verse 23 up to the end. Then he called two of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote a letter as follows: Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to the Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. So the soldiers carrying out their orders took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. Okay, so there's an escort team. There's a big escort team that the commander, Claudius Lysias, puts in place. Paul left Jerusalem with about 470 people. 470 people. And that's if you count, if the horsemen, there's 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen, and 200 soldiers. That's what the passage says. And if those are different groups of people, then we've got a total of 470 that were dispatched. So it was a small army, really, to make sure that the Roman citizen Paul would not be harmed. And this is God's protection for Paul, for his servant, to make sure he would get to Rome. And the Roman system was going to get him to Rome. Now he was going to Rome, and the Roman system was actually going to pay for it and even provide soldiers and so on. Evil and demonic forces were trying to stop him by any means possible. But what God has done is he had raised up a way for Paul to be able to go back, or to go safely to Rome. So the letter the governor. Let's talk a little bit about this letter. As I mentioned, it's a good example of narrative making. When I say narrative making, when an incident happens, I'm sure you've seen it even in a newspaper report, depending on newspaper or if you watch the news, depending who you're watching and what slant they give it, the narrative can change. It's the same incident that happened, but then there are issues or there are little details that are missing or that are omitted from one narrative, for just so that you give it a good slant and you make sure that it comes out giving you a good picture. And this is what the commander did. He describes himself in very positive and heroic terms. So he says, I came with my troops and I rescued him. All right. So we've got a situation where, yes, he did come in because there was this riot, and he did come in and, Paul was going to be killed. So the troops did go. They were dispatched to go and help him as a Roman citizen. And then he says, for I had learned that he was a Roman citizen. At that point, he did not know that this was a Roman citizen. This was just a riot that was happening, and he was trying to just have some order in there. So this is a little bit of a variation of the true sequence of events. So he says, I had learned he was a Roman citizen, therefore I dispatched my troops to go and rescue him. So kind of twisting and playing around with the facts there. And the plot was his way to get Paul out of the awkward situation where he could be accused of mistreating a Roman citizen. So this plot actually helped Claudius Lysias, because now he was able to say, I'm sending him to you because he is in danger here, and I want him to be able to answer in a different place. So up to that point, the commander had a very awkward situation, but because he learned of this plot, he was now able to do what he did. And the whole story was moved to Caesarea. He basically took this thing out of his hands and managed to push it on to Caesarea, where Paul could get a fair Roman trial. So now it's no longer the Sanhedrin that is before. It's no longer a Jewish trial. It's now a fair Roman trial before the governor that he's supposed to get. And he probably gave the order to the Sanhedrin to go to Caesarea, but after knowing that Paul was already safely delivered there. So the letter says that I gave the order that they come to you. But I would think that the order came because, you see, Paul was sent out in the middle of the night so that these guys would not know that he's going. And then I am sure that the order to go to Caesarea was made after the troops had come back with the news that they had dispatched Paul successfully. So Antiochus was 35 to 45 miles from Jerusalem. That's the first place that they go through this place called Antiochus. And the soldiers, Roman soldiers, usually marched 18 to 20 miles a day. That's foot soldiers. They would march 18 to 20 miles a day. 30 miles would be an unusual forced march. This place was 35 to 45 miles from Jerusalem. So it was an unusually long trip and would have taken all night. If they were started marching at 9 p.m., it would have taken them all night and at least some of the next day. Of course, you wouldn't march for 24 hours, but they did march for quite a lot of time during their day. So infantry was needed in the Judean hills. They needed infantry, foot soldiers were needed in the Judean hills because it was mountainous. But then after Antiochus, it was open country, and the infantry, the foot soldiers, went back, leaving Paul to finish the trip with the cavalry, the horsemen. So he went by horse, continued on to Caesarea. So the reading of the letter, generally when letters were read, or when people read in the first century times, they would read out loud. So the letter would probably have been read out loud, and you would have heard the content of the letter as it was read out loud. I'm sure Paul would have chuckled a little bit inwardly as he heard how Claudius Lysias, the narrative that Claudius Lysias gave to the governor, which really, he paints himself in some really glowing light. He omits the fact that he almost beat up Paul, that he imprisoned him and mistreated him. He doesn't mention any of that. He just mentions that this is a Roman citizen and I treated him very well, and I'm bringing him to you so that you can hear the case. And I'm also sending people who are, the accusers from the Sanhedrin, who will come and present their case to you. So that's how this story ends as far as the commander is concerned. And Paul now leaves Jerusalem, escorted by the army, to go to Caesarea Philippi. We will catch the story from at Caesarea Philippi. We're in the court of Felix in the next session. You're blessed. Continue in God's favor.